Hi, I'm Sahil Malhotra, Director of Business Development at Qualitics Data Machines. Welcome to QCast, where we bring in our leaders, experts, and guests to talk about AI challenges and opportunities. Today, we are going to interact with Sumanth Vakada, founder and CEO at Qualitics, and we are going to talk to him about the impact of AI on business growth. Welcome, Sumanth.
Hi, Sahil.
So, Sumant, last time we were having a discussion around how analytics and AI are important and how they have changed the way businesses are being done, at least over the last decade or so. Given that background, what has happened is that AI and analytics efforts, implementation specifically, all of a sudden have been attracting a lot of investments in that particular space. While AI and analytics efforts have been attracting a lot of investments in the space, why are companies still struggling to implement AI in meaningful ways? So could you help us understand that a little?
Sure, Sahil. That's a good question. So let us look at the problem that you're talking about. So the problem that you're talking about is typically called a scaling AI challenge. And what it typically means is companies usually don't have a problem in experimenting with AI. What they usually do is they build a small proof of concept using an example AI use case. And achieving success with a proof of concept is not that difficult. But where I've seen companies falter and usually taste failure is with taking that proof of concept and scaling it to a production level implementation, and then making that AI model run in real time with the data that's flowing in from all of the different data sources. So that is where I've seen many companies fail or attempt and fail with implementing that properly. In fact, the success rate with implementing AI at production level or scaling AI successfully in the low double digits or in single digits. And the companies that are usually having success in this team are the ones that are pouring in lots of money into making this a success at a very high cost. So it is a problem that needs to be solved. Before I tell you what are the factors that are causing this kind of failure, let me ask you a question. What do you think is the primary objective of a company that is operating in the market today?
Well, Sumant, for any organization that is operating in its competitive landscape, I think the biggest goal or objective for such company is to generate as much high profitability as possible.
Good. And extending that a bit further, beyond profitability, there are companies that are focused on achieving certain missions, whether they are for non-profit or for environmental reasons. For those kind of companies, it is also important to achieve those kind of objectives. And the reason I brought up that is because these kind of companies, whether they're trying to achieve a higher degree of profitability or they're trying to achieve some objective or some mission that is linked to that company, they are the ones that are depending on implementing AI to give them the insight from the data that they have to make sure that they take the next best action possible. So that means that the companies that are depending on AI to give them the right insight has to have access to the right kind of data, the most relevant data, the most contextual data, and the most up-to-date data that can help them take the next best action. So looking at traditional reporting, it's no longer useful to just say that you have achieved $1 million in sales in the last 1 month. What is more important and what is more relevant to the business is telling the business how they can achieve the next $1 million in sales and how they can maximize the profit in that $1 million of sales. So that is what companies are looking for. So if you paid attention to what I said, data is the key central asset here. So making sure that you have the right kind of data, the most contextual data, the most up-to-date data is very important. And not having that is the number one reason for companies to fail when they're implementing any kind of AI project. And in order to overcome that, what we advise companies is to have a data strategy where you are looking at all of your different data sources, identifying and inventorizing all the data points that you have, making sure of the structure of data and identifying the relationship from the data to another data point. And in the end, what you're essentially doing is building out a framework of data points from different sources. And I would call it building or manufacturing a data fabric of all your data inventory that you have. And I call it a fabric because just like how you have a fabric where you pull on one end, you feel it on the other end. Similarly, when you have a properly structured data fabric, you can see how one data point impacts another data point from a different data source. So having that kind of a data fabric is very important, and the process to get there is what we call as a data strategy. So the number one factor for the success is having a data strategy, and not having that is also the number one reason for a failure in implementing AI. The second most important factor from having a data fabric using a data strategy is having something that we call as an intelligence strategy. We have talked about this a lot, and we have even published an ebook on this. What we mean by an intelligence strategy is making sure that you are asking the right questions from the data that you have. That is one of the most important steps. And it may seem simple, but it's an incremental next step from having a data strategy. Unless you ask the right questions from your data, you will not be able to identify the right outcomes that you can drive from the data that you have and from the questions that you asked. I've seen many companies do this in a backward way, where they identify an AI outcome that they would like to achieve, and then they try to retrofit that AI outcome to the data that they have. And usually that's a recipe for disaster, because you are trying to create an artificial outcome from data that you don't necessarily have, and that is never successful. And I have seen that happen quite a few times. So having this incremental process of building a data fabric and having an intelligence strategy to ask the right questions allows you to be on the right path to implementing AI in whatever scale it may be possible. You may not be able to implement AI to the fullest degree that you would like to, but at least you will be implementing a successful AI model in this process. And the byproduct or the side effect of following this process is that if you identify that you do not have certain data points, then you go back to your data strategy and then add on those data points or identify those data sources where you can capture those data points. And then you recreate this process. So those two are the most important things. Now, the third most important factor is making sure that you have a stakeholder that oversees the entire process. And the responsibility of this stakeholder is overseeing the process, overseeing the milestones, identifying the resources that you need, identifying the overall objective that you want to meet, and managing the team or working with the team to get there. So that is an extremely important step on top of having a data strategy and an intelligence strategy. And then another responsibility of this key stakeholder is governance, making sure that you have the right governance structure to make sure that you're using data in the most appropriate way to make sure that you're driving the right outcomes.
Right. Very good points mentioned by you, Sumanth. So basically, for any company which is looking forward to implementing AI and analytics efforts seamlessly, they must look at, firstly, their own data inventory, which will help them weave out a data strategy. Second, using that particular data inventory and data points from that data inventory, they must ask intelligent questions and relevant questions, which actually will help them align with and achieve the objective they are out to achieve. And thirdly, you mentioned about the presence of a key stakeholder who's going to overlook this entire process of seamless implementation of AI and analytics efforts.
Exactly.
Now, given that background, Sumanth, could you, there are a couple of questions which kind of come to mind directly. First, when we look at this key stakeholder, does this key stakeholder need to be somebody internal from the organization or somebody who needs to be hired externally? Second, this particular key stakeholder, does this person need to have a previous AI and analytics implementation exposure or not? And thirdly, when we look at this particular key stakeholder, in terms of implementing this entire AI process, don't you think that somebody from the C-suite or somebody from the top management or senior management can double up in terms of responsibility for implementing AI and analytics in addition to what they are doing. So could you help us understand this a little?
Sure, Sahil. Another good question, or set of questions, actually. So to answer your first question, whether this person is an internal person or an external person is purely the choice of the company. It depends on the comfort level that the company has with the person and how committed this person is in driving the success for the company. So that I think is I would leave that up to the company to make that decision. The second factor is whether this person can have or should have a background in implementing analytics and AI initiatives or projects. I would say that is secondary to the fact that the person or the stakeholder needs to have a very good understanding of the market and the business that it's operating in. And the third factor is what you asked for, whether the person should be a part of the C-suite. They can be, but what I would say is that the responsibility of this person or the stakeholder should be primarily focused on AI. This AI should not be a side project, or it should not be a secondary project for the stakeholder. It has to be the only, if not the most important, focus of implementation for the stakeholder. The reason I say that is because implementing AI is extremely complex. So that is the reason why many companies start with a proof of concept, and proof of concepts are usually expensive themselves. But what I've seen happen is when a company is trying to implement AI, they start with a proof of concept, they're immediately diluting the overall effectiveness of the AI by picking a proof of concept, which is a narrowly defined scope compared to the full scale implementation. And then when that project changes hands from one function to another function, what you receive or what you achieve at the end of the day is a shadow of what you wanted to achieve. And that usually leaves people with very little motivation to go and then invest in a full-scale AI project. So that is why having a stakeholder that is completely committed to the success of AI and maintains the focus, the motivation, and the determination to implement AI successfully from start to finish is very important. And this will have to be their primary focus. So more than any other thing, I would say that the most important factor that the stakeholder needs to have is that they are committed to the success of AI. They need to have a very good understanding of the market the business is operating in, and they should be able to work with the entire organization, any function within the organization, very seamlessly, very effectively, so that they're maintaining the right levels of engagement and motivation to complete the project successfully. So I believe that if these three factors are in place, having a very good data strategy, having a very good intelligence strategy that are managed by the stakeholder, and making sure that they're following this process correctly, I would say that many more companies would be tasting success with implementing AI.
Right, Sumanth. Some very good points, mentioned by you, and thank you for enlightening us specifically on the aspect of the stakeholder, who's going to be the central pivot around which the entire AI and implementation efforts will be seamlessly integrated into the organizational goals. So in a nutshell, any company which is looking at implementing AI and analytics efforts seamlessly must have the right data strategy in place, the right intelligence strategy in place, and the presence of a key stakeholder who is not only accorded with the responsibility to only look at AI implementation successfully and meaningfully, but also this individual or person needs to have, as rightly said by Zara's Senor Ortega, 5 fingers on the market and 5 fingers on the customer in order to understand how important it is to look at implementation of this effort successfully. And just to top it up, Sumanth, I would say, as you rightly mentioned, that data is the central key asset for any organization. Any organization must always kind of categorize data as a separate asset category, like we have current assets in any organization. So I think there must be a separate category of assets which kind of look only at data.
Mhm.
This will not only help organizations in generating meaningful insights, but also help the organizations in generating incremental revenue generation opportunities and higher profitability in case of for-profit organizations, and also in the case of not-for-profit organizations or mission-driven organizations. They would be closer to what they want to achieve in terms of their mission in case of not-for-profits. So really, thank you for the insights on this, Sumant.
Thank you, Sahil. Excellent points. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumanth, for your insightful thoughts on the impact of AI on business growth. We just heard Sumanth Vakra, founder and CEO at Qualitics Data Machines, and we will be back with more thoughts from Sumanth and our other team members soon. Please follow us if you like our content, and you can reach out to us at the link in the description if you have any questions. Thank you.